Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. My name is Sarah and today we are going to be doing a autumn book recommendation video. So this is just a video filled with books that I personally think feel very autumnal. Almost all of these are horror or thriller books, which is a very spooky season kind of genre selection. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get right into this. I thought for some reason that I did a video like this every year, and then I was looking back at my past videos. It turns out I've only done this, like a specific autumnal book recommendation video, once a couple of years ago, so I don't know why in my head I thought I did it every year. But I had about 10 recommendations in that video, so I'm going to update this with 11 more. So the first book is actually the one book that is not a thriller or horror book, and that is Middle Game by Shauna McGuire. This is more of a urban fantasy. This is the first book in a series. I loved this first book. Did not like the second one at all and haven't read the third one. I do honestly think that this first book honestly could be a standalone. Originally, I think was supposed to be a standalone, and then she started building on kind of this universe, and I just think it stands well by itself. So this book, like I said, is like an urban fantasy. It has kind of this dark academia adjacent vibe, almost X-Men-esque adjacent vibe. Not exactly like mutants, but kind of like mutants. So we're following a set of twins, Roger and Dodger, and we're starting from when they are very little. One of them has a extreme gift with words, the other has an extreme gift with numbers, and we're basically following them as they grow up and as their lives kind of intertwine and come apart because they were separated at birth. And then we're following them as they go through their childhood, grow up, and there's this other character who's basically watching them as they grow up and wanting to use them to kind of like take over the universe. And again, this has just got kind of that like dark academia adjacent vibe, almost like witchy vibe to it to some extent, and then kind of the mutant adjacent vibe, and I just think it's a really great book for fall. And then after that we have Respread by Ian Reid. I've talked about this a few times this year in previous videos, but I just think it's a really great book for this season. I would say it's a quieter type of horror. It's not one of those in-your-face scary type of books, but it's more one that is unsettling on the surface, and the more that you think about it, the more creepy and scary it gets. It doesn't have a super strong plot, it's more of a character study. So we're following this woman, Penny. She is an elderly artist, and her partner had died a while ago, and she had been living on her own, but then something happens and she is put into this care facility that her partner had set up for her to be put into kind of while he was still living. And while she's in this care facility, she starts wondering if this facility is something other than what it appears to be on the surface. It's a very remote, kind of secluded facility in the middle of this forest. There are very few residents. I think there's like only 4 or 5 other residents outside of her, and there's only 2 people that really run the facility. And again, it's just kind of got this slow, creeping sense of dread. It's much more of a character study, and we're focusing on the idea of being elderly and kind of what that does to your mind. I think that it paints this kind of horrific concept in a very empathetic light, where you feel such a strong sense of empathy for this main character, and you're just, I don't know, you're scared for what she's going through. I feel like sometimes in horror books, when it's playing with this concept of what's happening to this character, in a way you're kind of scared of the character to some extent, and in this you're more scared for the character. And I think that was just handled really well. But yeah, I highly, highly recommend Respread by Ian Reid. So then after that I have more of a direct sense of horror book, and that is Tender as the Flesh by Agustina Batsterica. This is an Argentinian horror novel. It's a translated work, and it plays with the idea of what happens if humans are no longer able to eat animal meat, and instead we resort to cannibalism and kind of this mass production of human flesh to consume. It is very, very descriptive in its viscera. It's not for somebody with a weak stomach. It's very gross. So I think if you do not like body horror or pretty strong sense of gore, I don't think that this book is for you. However, if you like that kind of thing, this is honestly really great. I think it's just a very bleak and disturbing look at how quickly humanity kind of takes this group of people and establishes a sense of otherness to them. You know, obviously the cannibalism is very disturbing, but just the kind of metaphor of, you know, that othering of a group of people is very disturbing to think about just in our world as it is today. And then the ending just like was so bleak and like shocking to me. I did not see the ending coming. I just had a great time with this. I think it's just a great kind of dystopian horror. It's one that feels like a car crash that you can't look away from. So yeah, that is Tender as the Flesh by Augustina Bazterrica. Next, I have a book that's great if you like creepy children, but can also be hard to stomach at times, and that is Your House is on Fire, Your Children Are All Gone by Stefan Keesby. This is a book that, again, centers around children, very creepy children. We are in a remote German village in the 1940s. It's kind of a coming of age, but make it horror and unsettling kind of a book. They're basically growing up and weird, unsettling things are happening either by these children or just in this village in general, and treated as very normal, and that's kind of part of what makes this so uncomfortable. And we kind of flash to kind of the present day at some points as they are revisiting this village, but the main focus is these four characters as they are children. And this is another one that feels kind of lacking a distinct linear plot and more a series of like vignettes of these occurrences that happened when they were children, and it's just very uncomfortable at times. The writing style is very clinical and has a sense of detachment, which I honestly think aids well with the sense that all of these things that are happening are treated with a sense of normalcy, and then you add in that kind of detached sense of writing, it makes it more uncomfortable in my opinion. But very, very creepy children, very unsettling things, and I just think that this is a great kind of short book to read during the season. So next I'd like to throw in a thriller, and that is The Black House by Carol Johnstone. This has kind of a supernatural element to it, or a speculative element, I guess. So we're following this young woman who 20 years ago, when she was about 5 years old, she believed that she was the reincarnation of this man who had died on this Scottish island. And kind of things blew up. There was a documentary that was started to be made for it, but she was absolutely convinced, and when she's 25 she still has this weird sense of kind of, was that real? Did she really believe that? Was it kind of her being manipulated? And so she decides to go back to this Scottish island and try to figure out what happened to this man that she believed that she's the reincarnation of. And it's kind of this, her questioning her sense of reality, and then this kind of gothic exploration of the past of this island. And I think that it's got this like really creepy atmosphere to it, this really dreary kind of rainy, stormy atmosphere, and then just, you know, this small village that an outsider is trying to infiltrate, that kind of a vibe. And it's just kind of weirdly slow-paced in the sense of a small village feel, yet fast-paced in plot. And I think that those two somehow come together really well in this book. But very, very strong atmosphere, kind of those spooky speculative supernatural elements, and just a really great thriller that I had a great time with. And then next I have two books by Darcy Coates. Both of these I have talked about a couple of times throughout this year, but I, again, just have had a really great time with her works, and these are the only two that I've read, but I do plan to read more from her. She's got quite a large backlog. So the first one that I like to talk about is Hunted, and this is a very fast-paced survival type of horror. We're following a group of friends, one of them whose sister went on a kind of a vacation hike type of a thing in this national forest, and she suddenly has disappeared. Earlier in her vacation, you know, she was posting every day on social media, and suddenly her posts go silent, nobody can contact her, and when the family reaches out to this small town that the national forest is part of, they are kind of just brushed off, told that you know, they don't have the capacity to do a full-blown search. And so the brother and a couple of his friends decide that they are going to take matters into their own hands and go on a search themselves. And quickly this becomes a game of survival, possible creature horror, just very, very fast-paced. We're actually flipping back and forth between some of the perspectives of this friend group and then actually one of the law enforcement members who is kind of in charge of this investigation, yet again lacking the resources, and doesn't fully believe the group of friends when they say, you know, something is happening here. And it's just a wild ride. It kind of just takes you by the wrist and doesn't let you go, drags you along through this whole story. And I just had a really great time with this. Really loved some of the twists that were involved in this book, and I think it's just a great one that if you like a fast-paced survival type horror. And then the other book by Darcy Coates that I'd like to recommend is From Below. This is kind of the exact opposite style of novel from Hunted. This is more of a slower paced gothic haunting type of a book, but set on a shipwreck way deep in the ocean. So back in the 1920s, there was this ship that had disappeared and presumed to be shipwrecked, considering it never docked anywhere, and it disappeared under very odd circumstances. There were kind of these weird distress signals that were being sent out, and nobody could find it on the path that it was supposed to be taken. And then suddenly the only kind of physical evidence from the shipwreck was an oar from a safety boat that had washed ashore in a country that was way off route that the ship was supposed to be on. And then in present day, there is a ship that's detected way deep in the ocean that is presumed to be this shipwreck. And so we're following a group of people that are going to be creating this documentary about kind of the first contact with the shipwreck and kind of preliminary explorations of it. And this book kind of flips back and forth between the past leading up to the day of the sinking of this ship, and then the present as these people that are creating this documentary go down and explore this ship. And very quickly, some very strange things start happening during both past and present. And again, it's got this very slow-paced, creeping sense of dread that's accumulating throughout the entire book. Kind of this gothic feel to it, which is kind of fun considering the setting. And since it is deep in the ocean and it's so far down that, you know, sunlight doesn't reach it, and it's just very silt and sediment covered, where it gives this very claustrophobic feel and kind of this narrow sense of vision that they have, where they have to be careful about how fast they swim to not create a silt out. It just adds to this layer of dread and this sense of atmosphere, and I just think that this was a great kind of a haunted gothic type of story. So next I have a novella that really caught me off guard, and that is Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. And this one's hard to recommend because I really think that people should go in not knowing what this book is about, and going in blind, because for me, I read the back, and I kind of think it spoiled part of it, yet there was still this like aspect of it that I wasn't expecting, and I just think going in blind would make that aspect kind of have a even harder punch to it. Basically, I think the only thing that you should know going into this is that it deals with a group of friends that are going to play a prank by putting a mannequin in a movie theater, and quickly things spiral out of control in a very unexpected way. Again, this is very short, it's a novella, but I think it's just very fast pace at the same time. You know, sometimes novellas kind of have to go at a very odd pace, yet I think that this is perfect, the length that it is, and pacing and everything. I had a really great time with this. I know I'm being very vague, but I think if you're wanting kind of a surprising take on kind of a horror novel revolved around a prank gone wrong, I think this is a great one to pick up. And then next, I actually have another survivor horror novel, and that is The Croup by Nick Cutter. This is another one that is actually very gross in its description. So I think if you have a hard time with body horror and a horror revolved around consuming things, I think you might want to steer clear of this. I do also want to warn that there is animal violence in this, kind of animal death, animal cruelty. However, that being said, it's done in a way where it's very purposeful. And even though it's very descriptive, I don't think it's gratuitous at all. I think that everything that happens in here is done with a very distinct purpose in either stating something or moving the plot along. To tell you what this book is about, we are basically following a group of Boy Scouts, and they are going on a weekend camping trip on this island. And nobody else is supposed to be on there, but kind of the first night this man appears who is very starved. He's just absolutely emaciated, yet he is eating absolutely everything in sight. And very quickly this turns into kind of a survival in the sense of these boys are all now trapped on this island, and there is now an infection going around. And it's just very bleak yet very riveting. The pacing is perfect in this, and I think about halfway through when you're kind of wondering, okay, where can this book go from here? A new element gets added in that I think is just a perfect addition to this book, considering these characters. I think all of the characters are done really well and explored really well. About half of them I hated and just wanted to punch in the face, and the other half I was just absolutely rooting for, and I think it's just a really great mix to this. Again, just very unsettling, very horrific and creepy and gross, and just really, really well done. After that, I have kind of a fun horror. It's creepy at times, yet also funny and heartwarming at times, which is an odd combination, but done really well by this author, and that is A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. This is a Southern Gothic novel where we're following our main character, whose mother is usually this very eclectic, colorful, loud type of personality, where her house is really well, like, it reflects that a lot. It's usually very just kind of brightly colored and cluttered with all sorts of, you know, soft, warm, weird kind of decorations. However, she gets a call from her brother who says that there is something weird happening with Mom and I need you to go check it out. So she goes to go visit her mother, and she finds her house to be absolutely sterile. Just white walls, all of the kind of warm, fun decorations are gone, all of the colors are gone, and her mother is acting very nervous and weird and kind of like a constantly like looking over her shoulder kind of a vibe. Our main character decides that she's going to stay for a while and try to figure out what is going on. This is just kind of like a fun, heartwarming, yet creepy type of horror at the same time. Kind of got this haunted house type of a vibe, and just a really fun dynamic between the mother and the daughter that I just really loved their relationship. I loved the main character a lot. I think T. Kingfisher does a really great job of writing these kind of like quirky characters. She's got just like a very nice blend of quirky and creepy. And again, this is another really short one, but I think if you are wanting kind of a Southern Gothic with a fun twist, this is a great one to pick up. And then the last book that I'm going to recommend is a thriller, and that is The Last Word by Taylor Adams. This is just a really fun, fast-paced, almost ridiculous at some points, but yet in a good way, type of cat and mouse thriller, where I flew through this, could not put it down, and absolutely loved it. In this book, we're following a main character who is house sitting, and she's house sitting in this small kind of vacation type town on the Washington coast in the off season. And the house that she is sitting for is kind of in this remote part of the countryside, and the only real neighbor that she has is like, I don't know, a quarter mile away, but otherwise she's very isolated, just kind of there by herself with her dog, and just spends the day kind of just reading anything she can get her hands on her Kindle, and is just kind of like depressed. And throughout this book you kind of find out more about why that is, kind of what's going on, but the main purpose of this is that one day she's reading a very, very poorly written horror novel, and she gives it 1 star, leaves a very scathing review, and then pretty soon gets contacted by the author, who is very upset by the 1-star review, asks her to take it down, politely at first, yet increasingly threatening, and then suddenly weird things start happening in her house, and she's convinced that this author is coming after her. And again, just very fast-paced, ridiculous at times, yet you can't help but just suspend your disbelief and fall into this book. I had a really great time with it. It's got kind of this fun element where the author, who is kind of doing the stalking and is angry and coming after this main character, is a bit of like an incel, and you almost at some points switch between his perspective, and you're reading things as they're happening in one way, and then you switch to the main character's perspective and she's seeing things happening in a very different way, and it's just adds this element of like humor to it, which is quite entertaining. And yeah, I think if you're looking for just a very fun, fast-paced cat and mouse thriller, this is a great book to pick up. So those are my 11 autumnal recommendations that I have for you. I hope one of these sparks your interest to pick it up, and if you've read any of these, I'd love to hear about your thoughts on them down in the comments below. As always, I really appreciate you guys watching this video. I hope you stick around and consider subscribing. But again, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!